Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, I'm here in Franklin, Tennessee at Angry Audio with Mike Dosch and Corny Gould. We're talking about niches and needs. That is, you find a need, maybe it's a niche need, but you fill the niche need, and that's getting hard to say. We got a lot of stories and some interesting thoughts on development of products for broadcast. It's coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. We have a mic around here, don't we? Yes, we do. Mr. Catfish, could you grab that mic?
As a matter of fact, here's a microphone.
There's the microphone, and we don't have a light at the top of the tower. You're not in that business yet, are you?
Right behind you.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, that kind of, okay. Depends on the tower. All right. I'm Kirk Harnack, and today, not in the Telos Alliance studio. Got the T-shirt, but not in the studio. But we're in Middle Tennessee, in Franklin, Tennessee, at the headquarters of Angry Audio. Angry Audio. And I heard last week, I got a text from this guy. He said, "Hey, we're going to be in Nashville. Do you want to break bread together? Do you want to have a meal together?" And I said, "Corny, I'm way too cheap for that. We're not going to be going out to a restaurant." And then my wife, the chef, is working this week, so can't do that. So I'm sorry. And you don't want hot dogs and Pop-Tarts from me. That wouldn't.
No, that's hardcore bachelor food.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, we decided to meet here at Angry Audio and talk to Catfish, talk to Corny Gould about things that are happening at Angry Audio. And really the theme of today's show is, what did I say? Niches and needs. Niches and needs. So finding a need, and even though it's a niche need, we got a couple of guys here who are very, very good at fulfilling those needs in ways that are elegant and affordable and make sense for the things that we as engineers do in broadcasting. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So glad that everybody's here. Corny, you traveled down here from the Cleveland, Ohio area, didn't you? And you're here for a couple days?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And here all week we've been planning out stuff.
Planning. We're making plans for niches.
Exactly.
And needs.
And if you don't already know him, this is Mike Dosch, Catfish, and he's the proprietor, the owner here at Angry Audio. And man, I've known you for 25 years.
25 years.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
We met at NAB 25 years ago.
Wow.
Because it was 2000.
You realize I've been married this year for 25 years.
Wow. But yeah.
Yeah, she still puts up with me too. So there you go.
Well, I enjoy your company, but not every day.
Yeah, indeed.
it's a different thing. And Corny, how long have I known you?
Probably similar.
Close. Yeah.
So when did you appear again?
Pardon?
When did you appear again?
Well, in 2000, I started working with Telos Alliance, and I think I visited you at CBS Radio in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes.
And maybe I had an audio processor under my arm. Maybe. I don't know. And you probably said, "No, I designed those myself."
Well, not quite at that time. Not DSP stuff at that.
Well, you were thinking about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So in our show today, and this is what I'm excited about. When I talked to Catfish and Corny, I said, "Why don't we do a show together, talking about what is such the entrepreneurial spirit and the inventor spirit of recognizing a need for something and thinking, can I do that? Well, yeah, I can do that. That's not too different from what I already do, or that's something that I'd always wanted to learn about and create a solution for." And as broadcast engineers, sometimes we create solutions in the field, and sometimes they're kind of elegant, and sometimes they're pretty darn sloppy. And if they're sloppy, they may show up, with the next engineer 20 years later saying, "Who did this?" Well, I'm proud to say that since I've known Mike Dosch, he comes up with elegant solutions that tend to work really well and last a long time and fit the need. I guess that's a good way to say it. They fit the need.
It's very kind of you to say that, but really about half of my ideas don't work at all.
Well,
but the other half do, and so we've been able to make a nice little business out of it. So thank you very much.
how many of Edison's filaments didn't work out?
All of the ones that weren't tungsten.
there you go. There you go.
Yes.
And Corny, you've kind of been in the same boat, although not a huge range of products, but you've had ideas about treatment of audio and what the treatment does to make it sound, to make our brains happy with it. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Right.
and you call that, well, you've kind of called that what, chameleon? Was that your?
Yeah. Originally, Audio Chameleon was just a single audio processing device. Well, and I guess over time I had different variations of it, but it was originally a product. And when it came time to make it into something real for the world, we decided to use it as the name of anything that's processing designed by me. So it's its own product line of Audio Chameleon devices.
Well, we get to talk about, I want to find out if any of your early ideas that you had are applicable in things that you design these days, audio processing algorithms these days. And I'm maybe some of them were foolhardy ideas that you said, well, that's not going to work after all.
So right now you want to talk about?
Well, no, we'll tell you what. Let's thank you for the nice segue here. We're going to do a quick commercial break and hear from our friends at air.com, and we're going to be right back in 1 minute. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Ricky Lee, the CEO of Air. Ricky, you guys make a fantastic automation system, but streaming is a really big deal. Tell me about streaming with Air.
It really is. We've got a beautiful streaming platform with an incredible dashboard with fantastic analytics. And you can buy it for just $20 a month, all you can eat. No limits on bandwidth or bit rates. And you can also record shows as well. So if you like to deliver on-demand content for $20 a month, you can stream and deliver that on-demand content to an RSS feed that can feed your radio player, your mobile apps, or a podcast that people can download and enjoy.
Now, $20 a month, that must be for just some slow MP3, right?
No, MP3, AAC, and we also now support HLS, which is big in the industry right now.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How do I start to explore or find out more about streaming through Air?
You go to air.com, AIIR.com/streaming, and from there, with a credit card, you can sign up and get started.
We're back. Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech. And I want to mention something about air.com. As I mentioned so many times that my radio stations are users of the Playout One system, which is under the air.com umbrella. And we had a file server failure late last week. I got to tell you, the support team at air.com was on it like this. And within a few hours, they had our backup server, which we never took the time to really make it a hot backup, that within a few hours they had it ready to go, all of our music, everything in it, and just everything done. And so I really appreciate air.com and their support team. We're users of Playout One Pro, so we're entitled to some support, and that's what we pay for every month, and we've really been happy with it. So thanks a lot to Dave Brierley Jones and Ricky Lee for providing such good service, and also just all the guys who handle the support. All right. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, episode 752 of This Week in Radio Tech, and we're live at Angry Audio in Franklin, Tennessee. Catfish is here. Catfish, this is your business.
Yes, this is my business. I started it in 2018, part-time thing in the house. It was in the dining room, and then it was in the studio, and then it was in the guest room, and it was in half of Porter's room, and it was in the master closet. And it was about then that AJ said, it's not going to be in the house anymore. In the garage. I forgot the garage. Yeah, definitely in the garage. And so we moved into this space. We've been here for 5 years, actually. And so it's grown up a little bit bigger than a home-based business now, but we're still doing the same things we started out doing, and we've expanded a bit into some new areas. But as you say, we do kind of concentrate on solving problems
so
the best we can.
We're not able to take a tour of this place, but you've got a design office here, you've got inventory here, you've got replacement parts here, you've got a final assembly and test area here, a shipping area in the back. Yeah. You probably have a bathroom, although I haven't visited it yet.
Well, yeah, we do have that. Actually, we're in the production department right now.
So talk to us about where we are.
Yes, behind you is one of the assembly workstations. Okay. And then back in that corner there is, it's a little bit more of a shrine. You see how beautiful it is?
Yeah.
well organized.
Yeah.
That's where the lovely Mrs. Catfish, don't call her that. That's her workstation.
All right.
So it's always nice. And over back behind me, we have audio test. We have an audio precision and electronic equipment for testing and proving that the products work. And then right to the right of me, we have a sound test. And so everything gets fully electrically tested and also listened to before it goes out the door. And I'm not going to say I listen to everything before it goes out the door, but quite a lot of it I do.
And even if you don't listen to something, it does get tested.
Well, no, somebody's
Yeah.
listening to
Oh,
it.
somebody
I'm just
is.
saying that in many
Yeah.
cases, it might even be me.
Okay.
Because we're
Okay.
still pretty small.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit curious. Your career started. Well, I know you worked at Pacific
I
Recorders
did.
and you designed stuff for them. Before that, were you designing electronics?
I was actually I have been doing audio electronics since really my late teens.
Mhm.
And but PR&E was kind of my first commercial job. But they found me because I had been hot rodding recording studios around Southern California. So I would take recording consoles and modify them for people, and they would pay me. Or tape machines, and in some cases I would repair them, but in other cases I would hot rod them, and they would pay me. And so somebody from Pacific, it might have been Jack himself, had heard about this kid that was going around hot rodding studios, visited. I wasn't there at the time, but he visited the studio and talked to the studio manager, saw the work, and said, we should talk to this guy. And so I came in for an interview. My first exposure to broadcast gear,
Mhm.
it still makes me laugh, is, so radio stations use consoles?
Okay.
So yeah, it got better from there.
But they use consoles that are different from the ones you had been working on.
Quite different. Although Pacific did a really nice job of bridging that gap.
Mhm,
In other words,
mhm.
what a radio console was before Pacific came along was different than Pacific, which brought high-end audio, Deane Jensen level audio circuitry and RF proof circuitry. It was actually a more advanced level, kind of more of a recording studio approach to broadcast. And
We're going to get to some examples of the work that you've done in a little bit, but I'm curious to understand what were some of the milestones along the way where you picked up on, this is the right way to do an op amp, or I'm fishing for the right words here, but this is the right way to do a mic preamp. This results in manufacturability and very low noise at the same time and great headroom. Where do you pick up these ideas?
a lot of it's experimentation,
Mhm.
and a lot of failures. That smoke right there, that's probably not a good thing. We don't want to do that again. But I will tell you that
That's the quietest preamp I've made. It just smokes too much.
yeah. So there's absolutely mistakes along the way, but I will say I have to give much of the credit for my career to Deane Jensen,
Oh.
because he was a technical consultant for Pacific.
Oh.
And
okay,
so,
okay.
people knew that, hey, we used a lot of Jensen transformers and things like that in our products. They knew that, but they didn't know that Deane was actually kind of behind the scenes helping us with circuits and ideas. And, hey, Mike, don't do that. That's not going to work.
Mhm.
Let me explain deconvolution. This is how it really works. And so, he was kind of a mentor to the entire engineering team. And man, it was like taking a sip from a fire hose working with that guy. He was brilliant. And so he really helped me a lot. He helped the company a lot, and then there were all the experiments and failures along the way.
You've mentioned Deane Jensen twice, and I would imagine that a lot of our viewers have heard that name before. I'm familiar with it, although I came along in broadcast engineering at a time when everybody was going transformerless, and Deane Jensen is famous for Jensen transformers. What were some of couple of his philosophies or some of his products that made them work so well?
Before Jensen Transformers, before he started that company, he had actually been chief engineer at Quad 8, the recording studio company, recording console company, basically. And yes, you might recognize him for Jensen Transformers because that's a product that had his name on it.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't recognize that he made the world's most interesting, best-sounding discrete op amp called the 990, the JE 990. That was his. And he designed it, and he presented it as a paper to the AES, and he put it out in the public domain. He never made a dime on it. That was just Deane. So this thing was brilliant, and he said to the industry, "Please use this," and we did.
Wow.
And so he was really an interesting guy. He really kind of cracked open a lot of different ways of thinking about audio that people hadn't done before.
Something similar that I've noticed between both of you inventors is that a lot of times when you're looking to solve a problem, you're able to back up and ask the question, what is it we're really trying to do here? In other words, you're not necessarily going in the rut and the thinking that everybody else is. I used to have an employee, a guy that worked for me, Robert Benjamin. And Robert worked for Harris Corporation for a while. Anyway, Robert, sometimes we'd be doing an engineering project together, and I'd feel like we were getting stuck, or it was just looking like real drudgery work. And Robert would say, "Wait a minute, what is it we're really trying to accomplish here?" And well, we're trying to clean out the amplifier cavity on this RCA transmitter. He said, "Yeah. Why don't we take that tube socket out and take it down to the car wash, because that's going to clean it out really good." I said, "There must be 300 parts here. Do you know how to put them all back together?" I mean, he says, "It's not that big a deal."
Mm-hmm.
And so he'd take the whole cavity apart and lay the parts out nicely on the floor, hope nobody would, janitor wouldn't come along and broom them up. And we'd take the tube socket down to the car wash. Well, it just seems like solving problems for both of you guys. You look at it like, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And maybe there's a different approach to take it.
It's actually a great insight. In fact, there's a product that we're using right now called the headphone disconnector. I can't even show it to you, but
We're using all three of them.
Yeah, we're using all of them right now. But the idea is it came from a customer, and he had called me on the phone and he said, "Why don't you use steel jacks on your headphone amps?"
Steel jacks.
Steel jacks.
Okay.
And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, I've got people. Sometimes they forget their headphones are on, and they walk away, and they're breaking the plug, or they're breaking the jack." In this case. So if you use steel jacks, then it's going to not damage the headphone amp. And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll take your problem, but I don't think I'm going to take your solution. In other words, I want to think about it and see if that's the best answer. I get it. I understand what you're asking for, but people walking away with their headphones on, let me think about that. What could we do? How could we solve that problem?" And ended up actually just taking an idea out of Apple's playbook. Because Apple, for years, has had this idea, which is, if you accidentally step on the power cord that goes into your laptop, we don't want you to break the motherboard. So we have this magnetic disconnector. We have this magnetic, they call it a MagSafe connector in Apple's case.
Right.
And so the idea is, nothing broke. You can just snap it back in place. And so I thought, well, why don't we do that? And so ultimately, long story short, we did that, and we solved his problem.
Tell you what, you
want to show it?
I'll do a TV no here and move the camera around.
So here it is.
For our show, we're using this little mic mixer from Zoom, and this mic mixer has XLR inputs coming from our headsets, but the headphone jacks are all 1/8 inch. Now we're going to get back to that in just a minute. So now Catfish, let's take a look at the disconnector.
Oh, it's just this little magnetic piece right here. So if I accidentally walk away without unplugging, now I can't hear you because my headphones are not connected, and now they are again. You see, so I can just walk away and nothing gets damaged. Now, if this was not in here, I would probably pull your whole mixer onto the floor,
right,
and probably break the jack or the plug or my headphones or my neck.
Right. Now, what happens if you plug that backwards and your left and your right reversed?
It's a magnet, so it won't.
Oh, it won't. Okay,
right. But if you get it kind of right, it just goes right back together again. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, so is this kind of technology with these magnets? I take it you probably had those made for you, or you found the right ones that work for you?
And I actually believe the company that makes the internals on this has to, I think they license it from Apple, because I actually believe they own a patent or something.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward thing. We had to make a custom mold and some of these kinds of things, but that's an example, and I think it's a pretty good example of you take the problem, but you don't necessarily take the solution the customer's asking for.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you say, is there another way to solve this problem? Okay. By the way, the customer that came up with this, he came up with the problem. He got some of these for free.
There you go. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out is the headsets that I got, the sports headsets, have 1/4 inch tip ring sleeve stereo headphone connectors, and this little mixer here with the headphone amp, it has 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter. So you can mix and match on the headphone disconnector the female 1/4 inch and the male 3.5 millimeter. So that made it easy to, not only did I get a disconnector, but I got an adapter
Yes.
to adapt the size. Okay, we'll put the camera back in place and see. I don't think they're going to hire me to work in New York City on the camera crew. All right, there we go. So that's, solving a problem.
Yeah.
That way.
And you're right. Corny is really good at this. It's it's not just tech either.
Mm-hmm.
You can do this in business. We do it all the time. Hey, let's go run this ad because everyone's running ads. Is advertising the best way to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Is this the right medium? What if we didn't do that?
Yeah.
Is there some other way to get the message out? In other words, every problem could have a number of potential solutions. And just because there's a particular one that seems right or one that maybe you've done in the past out of habit, I find that kind of unpleasant. Whereas if you kind of think about all the different angles and then you come back to the one that you were going to do originally and say, you know what, I've explored everything and this is the best answer, well, then there's nothing wrong with it. It's like, okay, I've explored all the options and that's the best answer. So I do believe that solving problems requires you to take a step back and consider different, and if you do consider different things, sometimes you come up with really inventive solutions. Like Corny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell you what, we're going to take a break right now. When we come back, I want to ask Corny kind of the same question. What problems were you trying to solve when you came up with the Audio Chameleon, and how did it work in your mind? But if it only did this when this audio came through, that would be really good. Because what ended up that, and the crowning glory that I'm familiar with has been the GeForce software that goes in an Omnia 11. And when I first heard that, my reaction, well, I'll tell you my reaction. I'll tell you when we come back. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, we're live from Angry Audio in Franklin, Tennessee with Cornelius Gould and Mike Dosch. And we'll be back right after this from Broadcast Bionics.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These can be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
Thanks so much to Broadcast Bionics, Dan McQuillan and his whole crew for making radio better, doing what we do anyway in radio, and coming up with more connectivity, more content, and more ways to put that content out there from Broadcast Bionics. Appreciate you guys in England, used around the world, Broadcast Bionics. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, This Week in Radio Tech. It's our 752nd episode. Not that matters, because what matters more is where we are. We're on location at Angry Audio in Franklin, Tennessee. We're just a few miles south of Nashville, Tennessee. We're very close to the normal headquarters for This Week in Radio Tech in Nashville. So
Would that be the Telos Alliance studio?
that's the Telos Alliance studio
Yeah,
in
very
Nashville.
good.
I brought a tiny part of it with me right here. I want to thank my folks at Telos for giving me a little bit of Thursday off to come and talk to people like Mike Dosch and Corny Gould. Corny,
Yeah.
good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So back when I met you, you had been working a little bit on this thing called Audio Chameleon, and I'd like to understand. And you've answered this before, but it's always good to hear it again and understand it more. Because let me begin at the end, and then you can fill in the middle. When I first heard your G-Force algorithms plugin that went into an Omni 11, my first thought was literally this. I was listening to a familiar song. It may have been a Fleetwood Mac song, but a song that I knew every jingle, every tingle, every drum beat, everything of that song, every snarl of Christine McVie's voice, And I heard that song and I thought, this is how that song is supposed to sound. This is, and I felt like, I like this. I just like the way it sounds. Now, a lot of us engineers like processed audio, but we don't like over-processed audio. That gets on a lot of people's nerves too much. It's fun for a minute or two, and then you realize, yeah, this is too much. Okay, but when I heard songs I knew through G-Force, I thought, this is how they're supposed to. The rhythm, the feel. My brain just got kind of happy listening to it. Okay, now we'll back up to the beginning and kind of bring us through the journey to get to where I got really happy.
So the it's an interesting little path. As I think back on it, it all started with a pirate station I built when I was a teenager, and realizing that it didn't sound like the other radio stations because I was just feeding audio right out of my board into the transmitter. It's like, well, I sound like the record. They all sound more exciting than the record, and I didn't know what that was. And so one of my friends' stepdads was listening to us playing around, and he kind of goes, what you guys need? You need an audio processor. And the second he said that, I was like, that's the missing piece. I know that's the missing piece. So I looked around to see, what would it cost to buy one of those things? And I think I saw an ad for an Orban box. Like, okay, how do you make one of these things? So, and I really had no idea what was going on in the box. All I had to go on was what the other radio stations sounded like.
Oh, okay.
So I said, okay, well, once I figure out how to make this automatic level control thing happen, I don't know how you do that, but I'll figure it out. Then I got to figure out how to make it sound like that. So once I did that, the first one was a wideband, and the very first thing I noticed was the pumping on some of the bass songs because it was wideband. And I knew that there was this multi-band thing going on, but I didn't know how to do crossovers at first. So it was a matter of, okay, I've got this wideband thing and I want to sound like that. And that was kind of like really the genesis of what would become Chameleon stuff, because I came up with ways in the sidechain to mitigate the pumping to the point where it was every bit as dense as other stations, but you didn't have the pumping going on. And that was kind of the magic piece. And then later I figured out to do 3 bands of that, and later 4 bands the whole time things were scaling up. And that became the first Audio Chameleon, which is a 4-band gain writing device. And I would put limiters behind it and all that, multi-band.
Now, it sounds to me, you're like, what I'm reading between the lines is you didn't go study schematics of other processors to learn how to build yours. You knew what you kind of knew what you wanted out of it.
Yeah, I knew the sound. I want that sound.
And then you thought, how can I build a circuit that does that?
Right.
Okay. So a lot of people learn by copying.
Right.
And that's typically how I learn. Okay, how do other people do it that it works right? And that, of course, limits my creativity in getting the problem. So I'm solving it just like that person did.
Right.
All right, go ahead.
And so my first clue that I might be onto something is when I was talking to another engineer in town. I was saying what I was doing, and you can't do that. Like, what do you mean? That'll never work. But I'm doing that. I don't know how, because that will never work. And then at that point, I knew to shut up. Just keep it to myself. And from there, I kind of looked into, I kept messing around with it for my own fun. And then I got into radio. And then at that point, I was looking at these boxes that I was hearing on the radio all these years. And I was like, okay, let me see how they do that. And that's when I started studying other people's designs, trying to understand what it is they're doing and why. And that kind of led on to running into Steve Church in the early days of Telos, when it was just him and one other person for the most part. May have been a third one, but it was very, just out of the garage mode. And I showed him what I was up to, and he asked a lot of questions and actually gave me ideas for free that I might want to play with to add to it. Okay, cool. Now later I ended up working at Telos and in customer support, and I got exposed to things, and then I left to do other things, on my own, and ending up back in CBS Radio where we eventually met. Came back into Telos into R&D because I started learning how to do DSP stuff, because I was thinking, okay, this chameleon thing, I want to make it into something. And by the time I had some ideas together on how you would do it, it was time to figure out how much it's going to cost to make it happen. Then the world went DSP. And it's like, and you had presets and you had all this stuff. It's like, yeah, I don't see much road for analog at this point. I just kind of set it aside for the moment. And started, learning how to do things in DSP. And once I was like doing that and I had ideas and I would show them to Frank, that's what got me back into Telos and R&D. And we started working together, and what would become the Omni 11, or once we decided we were going to, even before Omni 11, we decided my ideas and his ideas and the Clippers worked well together. So at that point, I just kind of set the whole chameleon thing on the side, and I kind of took basically the idea behind the 6 and just scaled it up into something, and that's kind of was my first DSP project, and that would be the orange face Omni 11. And I would add a little bits of chameleon stuff in there, like some of the things I had, like the band syncing that was in the 11. It was there, but the key was one of the other reasons I did not put chameleon in a lot of stuff was that the analog stuff worked well, and it did what it did very well, but it would not translate to DSP for me. And I can do little simple things with it, like the static band syncing and things that the user can adjust on the 11, but I couldn't implement the automatic syncing that the chameleons could do in analog.
Oh,
so there's some ideas and things I borrowed from it to put in there. And there's other things like how the timing networks work, which were all my things that I created, over the years to get the sound I want. And none of the boxes on the market had that sound. Tried to get the 11 to do that, and it came close. I mean, it was pretty close, but there's still things that I knew that I could do with my timing networks, that if I could make this happen, it would be awesome. Then, after a while, left Telos to pop into other things. But at that point, that's when I started revisiting chameleon, because at this point, I've looked at so many ideas at Telos, looked at what Orban does, looked at what this competitor does, and I started to appreciate what I was doing before more, because this was a kid that knew nothing about how this worked, figured it out with sound, and I started appreciating my ideas more and more. So,
in fact, that was actually about the time that Corny and I started working together.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an idea to solve a problem, which was, let's make a low latency headphone processor for studios.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had gotten to the point where there was so much latency in the transmission chain that board ops couldn't hear themselves over the air anymore. So they just hear themselves dry out of the board, and they want to hear themselves processed. So I said, Corny, we could make a headphone amp and processor combined.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, sign me up. Let's do this. And so I said, well, I want to use this particular set of DSP tools. And he said, I haven't used those. I'm going to have to learn them.
Mm-hmm.
And when he started playing with the tools, he said, and this was very clever, he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go model one of my old analog designs in DSP now. Again, in other words, I wasn't able to do this at Telos because of the tools, but this is a different set of tools. Let me try again.
Not only the tools, but I was still getting my head around what things you can do with DSP in a traditional way, which,
So the first DSP chameleon came out of Angry Audio, and that was a headphone amp processor, but it was so amazing. I mean, it was way beyond my expectations, and so that led to a streaming chameleon, and that led to a studio chameleon, and that led to chameleon software, and so he's just like on fire now. But it was pretty cool because it kind of, at least where I was exposed to this was at Corny's juncture. Hey, I'm going to try again in DSP to do what I've always dreamed of, and to bring forward some of this analog and really the original Chameleon, the first Angry Audio DSP Chameleon. I think that thing sounds totally analog in a really good way.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm curious, Corny, when you were describing your experimenting and listening, you mentioned a few minutes ago, did I like it? That is being you. Did I like it? Did you tend to avoid, or did you tend to get other people to, hey, listen to this and tell me what you think?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, even when I was experimenting with it in high school, anybody who's ever went to high school but me knew that I had cassette tapes of what I was working on. I would play, hey, listen to this, and probably drove them nuts trying to get their opinions on what they were hearing, because they had, I didn't realize that most people just don't have a clue about what audio processing does and don't know what to listen for. And I'm sure half the time, like, yeah, it sounds good, just so I can go away, but yeah, that was always doing that.
Did your friends think you were pretty weird?
Well, there were friends that thought, well, my actual friends thought I was pretty cool because I was doing things they couldn't figure out, but here I am tinkering and experimenting.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of other people who thought I was just weird, and folks that thought, I don't know why you do that. You're not going to get anywhere with that, so because they just didn't get what I was even doing and why I was doing it.
Wow. I love hearing the story. Now that you're really familiar with the DSP tools, are there still unexplored places in the processing realm?
Oh yeah. The biggest wall was trying to get something that I designed in analog to sound the same in DSP, and that's what the Chameleons up until this point and the Angry Audio line were all about. And in fact, to the point where they're the same architecture as what I had in the analog, which is 4 bands, and once I crossed that line and got it going, there were things in that little architecture that I had that I wanted to pursue the second I was able to do that stuff in DSP. So things like the software chameleons and all that, they're all pushing these newer ideas, so to speak, that were kind of sitting around in my head. And I had even bigger ideas beyond that. The second I'm able to copy this, and I know I can reliably duplicate it, and it can, I can repeat it every time. There's other things I wanted to finally get to that's been like the ultimate chameleon, if you will, the next gen chameleon, and that's kind of what I've been up to in the background lately.
So maybe a question you can address. I've asked this before of different people who have designed audio processing. Maybe I've asked you before. It seems very serendipitous to me that for decades people designed audio processing using the physical analog parts at hand, capacitors and light dependent resistors and vacuum tubes even, and think about the LA2A compressor and how popular that is. I've got a friend who rebuilt one, and I think he got some stupid money like $45,000 for it. It's just nuts. Anyway, and yet why is it that do you have any feeling about why these analog things, if we manipulated them just right and chose the right parts, we got a sound that was pretty pleasing to the human ear? And to duplicate that in DSP, we kind of have to work just as hard, even though the playground is pretty easy to manipulate and quick to change. What's the philosophy here? Whereas the analog stuff, is it just that capacitors and resistors and coils just sound good? What is that?
The biggest thing I found with that is the analog stuff kind of have this organic nature to it, and that each part that you put in to build a side chain, as each part does its thing, it's changing the way the other parts around it are functioning. So there's this, and when you design it, you don't necessarily think about it in that way. You just kind of, with me, it just kind of became intuitive. If I do this, I know I've got to do that over there because this is going to do this and do that. But it wasn't anything I was consciously thinking about until like the last, some of that thoughts were happening in the last analog chameleon I built, and I picked up on that before, in this project. And in DSP, everything is really literal. So this part's going to do its thing, and it's going to do it, and nothing else happens anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that's what I found was the missing piece. You know,
Uh-huh.
and once I was able to recreate that interaction loop, and then it starts to sound organic. Then it starts to sound analog, is what I call it. And that's really, when I say something sounds analog, that's what I'm talking about. It's like it's almost like a living thing, the way it functions, and you can take advantage of that to make things adapt and all that.
I got one more quick question before we take a break, and for you, Corny, and that is: are there any algorithmic processes that, when you discovered that they work to make audio sound the way you wanted to, some particular portion of the audio, did any of them surprise you? Like, wow, I'm surprised that would make that sound good, but here we are.
Well, that happened all the time, especially
Really?
in the analog. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, because when you design something, there's the thing that you set out doing,
Uh-huh.
and then there's 80 other things that it did that you weren't expecting. And sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're good,
Okay.
And I would okay, I like that. I really like that. I don't know how I did that. Let me take a look. Oh, I see. Okay, well, let me deliberately make this do that and make the other ones not happen. In analog, that's just a long, drawn-out process. But, in DSP,
I've seen you do this, though, in DSP, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago, you were saying, well, I sure didn't expect that to happen.
Yes.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. and that's the fun now that I've gotten over that wall. Now I'm working in a domain I'm familiar with. Now it's acting the way I'm used to things behaving, and now I'm having that fun again, where there's things that happen I don't like, but there's things I go,
see that? He's having fun.
Yeah. So yes.
Does that mean you don't have to pay him?
I wish.
Right. It's This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack here at Angry Audio in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm here with Corny Gould and Mike Dosch. And Mike, it's time to do a commercial. You're a regular sponsor of our show. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I hope we help you as much as you're helping me.
Indeed.
So we're gonna talk about, for 60 seconds, we're going to talk about whatever you want to talk about in the world of Angry Audio.
In the world of Angry Audio.
And a lot of times I talk about the Rave console, analog console, heavy duty, looks great. When Chris Tarr is on the show with us as the co-host, we talk about mic processing. Maybe there's something else you'd like to.
Well, since Corny's here, let's talk about Chameleon, because we've already been talking about Chameleon.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, our first product was this headphone processor.
Right.
And then that sounded so amazing, we said, well, we just can't contain it. So we made it into a live stream processor. So there's a second product. And then we decided, hey, there's an application for compellers, and you really can't get them anymore. And Arianes, which you really can't get anymore. These are preprocessors or studio processors. And we said, actually, I made the mistake of asking Corny, do you think you could make one that sounded as good as an Ariane? That was not the right question to ask Corny. And of course, and it sounds much better, and I regret that question, and I'm sorry, sir.
And we can circle back to that if you want when we get back to the interview part of the show.
C-Level is that product. And in parallel with that, we were developing software products. So we actually now have live stream processors. We have the C4S and we have the C6S. And these are both live stream processors that run as software on Windows, on Mac, as plugins, VST plugins, or as AU plugins, which are the Mac OS version of plugins. And so we've done pretty well with these. And I'm not done. We also have microphone processors now. We have Smooth and we have Rebel. And Smooth is optimized for Shure microphones. So it's kind of, the SM7 now has its own mic processor dedicated to that. But you could also use it with an SM5, an SM58. I mean, there's, as long as it uses the same or a similar element, it's going to sound fantastic. And then we have the Rebel, which is optimized for RE microphones like the RE20, the RE27, the RE320. And the idea with these mic processors is that they're pre-tuned, if you will. They're optimized for that particular microphone. So the frustrating thing that most people experience with microphone processors is trying to make them sound right. And you don't have that experience here. If you take an SM7 and you plug it into a Smooth, the audio that comes out is pretty much, don't touch that. It's perfect.
It's perfect the way it is.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
Awesome. Well, good. And how are your products available? Where do people get them?
We sell through Who's your favorite dealer?
Well, Broadcaster General Store is a big sponsor of
Broadcaster General Store
Sure.
is a fantastic reseller,
Uh-huh.
and all of the Angry Audio products are available through BGS and some other resellers who might not be your favorites.
Uh-huh.
So,
Mhm. So lots of dealers around the world.
around the world,
Okay.
we share a lot of dealers with Telos,
Uh-huh.
and we're pretty much available on every continent except for maybe the one with the emperor penguins. I don't think we're not on that continent.
Imagine them with headphones.
Indeed.
Penguins. Yeah.
Yes.
Our show, thank you, Angry Audio. AngryAudio.com is the website. Thank you, Suncast, for showing off the products there. You can hear some demos. You can demo some equipment through your dealer. And if you don't like it,
Yep. We even have if you go to our website, we even have live streams. Angry Audio Radio.
Oh, really?
And so
Okay.
there's some live radio
Okay.
stations that are being processed by Chameleon. You can hear them right now.
Awesome. I'd love to do some songs on that radio station. We could do some karaoke.
There you go.
That's going to sell a lot of processors, Kirk.
Catfish, you have something just there off to your right side. You're gonna
yes.
grab. Our show is also brought to you by our friends at Max Connect, and Max Connect and Angry Audio got together and designed an amazing product for which this show is called Niches and Needs. There was a need for this product. A lot of people are using these FM audio processors that run in Windows, and that's great. It's running on a computer. I've got some myself. Love them. They sound great, work great. But if you want to get the audio out of the computer, the FM audio or the processed audio out of the computer, that's a little bit more challenging. And nobody made a device that would actually do that right. So, Catfish, we'll hand it off to you. And
Okay.
if you like, I can
Great.
hold this close to the camera because I'm close to it.
So Josh Bone called me
Uh-huh.
and asked, "Hey, could you make a sound card, a USB sound card that did composite?" And I said, "Man, that's a good idea." In fact, I was so annoyed because it was his idea and not mine. But no, it's a fantastic idea. And so if you have Stereo Tool or I guess Telos has a product, Omnia SST.
Yeah.
So if you have a software-based audio processor and you want to deliver composite to your transmitter, this product is made for that. So we've got analog composite outputs, multiplex outputs on
Right.
BNC.
And I always tell people, if you're new to engineering, you may not realize that's kind of a fragile signal. You want to take really good care of that.
Mm.
You want to generate it precisely, carry it precisely, and get it into your transmitter precisely, because that affects the sound and even the coverage in some cases of your radio station.
Yep.
Your stereo separation, all that stuff. Okay.
So
Sorry.
in addition to analog multiplex out, we also have AES 192, which is high-speed digital output,
Mm-hmm.
and that happens in parallel. There's analog inputs. There's AES EBU inputs. You switch between what source you want, and
Right.
so that's the two processor input,
Okay.
and the whole thing interfaces to your computer via USB.
Right.
And this particular one doesn't have the USB card in it yet, so it's just got a gaping hole there, and it doesn't have a power cord because I just grabbed this out of stock because Kirk gave me 3 seconds.
3 seconds to
warning.
pick it.
Last commercial break.
What was it? I was going to ask you something else about all that. Some people are nervous because 20 years ago USB was problematic in some ways. Why is this not problematic? I've had one of your other products hooked up to a computer for years. It just sits there and runs. It never complains about a driver or anything else. Why does this work well?
USB has gotten a little bit of bad press over the years. Some people have had bad experiences with it with audio. I will say that in the support department, the number one problem we have with USB audio is something that will shock you, and that is default Windows settings for power saving. So what happens is if the USB port looks like it's not busy for a while, it just shuts it off. Well, that's not useful in audio.
It's not.
So, some of this is optimizing your machine for USB.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if people don't have an experience with that, they might have a bad experience. But look, this is, we've been using USB now for 25, 30 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
For audio. Yeah. Solid. All right. Is that a class compliant or does it use a separate?
This uses, it's class compliant for Linux and for Mac OS.
Uh-huh.
But it has a Windows driver.
A driver for Windows. Okay.
Yes, and that comes with the the product when you buy it.
Awesome. Cool. If you want more information on that, maxconnect.com, MAXXKONNECT. You can get that, I guess, probably from any dealer who probably sells Angry Audio.
Oh, I know BGS sells them.
Yeah, Broadcast General Store. All right.
Go.
Hey, it's This Week in Radio Tech. I'm here at Angry Audio in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm Kirk Harnack. Glad you're here. Hey, by the way, if you're thinking about it, if you like the show, hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, appreciate that. Subscribe and you'll get notified. Hit the little bell thing and get notified. And if you're watching this on Facebook, always appreciate a like, and you subscribe to our Facebook page as well. All right. Boy, you know what? We're going to run out of time, and you brought some show and tell items, and I really want to get to some of them.
I did.
What would you like to talk about first?
Okay. So this is pretty fun. I really like this product.
I like it. I like this too.
Yeah. So this is our new product. It's called a mic stand gizmo. We introduced it at NAB. The mic stand gizmo.
All right.
And so this part up here is the Yellowtech mic stand. That's a brand new product from them.
It says Yellowtech on that side and Mika on that side.
And this part down here, the very bottom, is the base that comes with the Yellowtech mic stand.
Okay.
The part in the middle that's sandwiched between the stand and their base is our part, and that's the mic stand gizmo. So we basically took one look at this thing, said this is adorable, and all it needs is a headphone amp and maybe an on-off control, and maybe a volume control for the headphone amp, and maybe even one of our magnetic headphone disconnectors. Wouldn't that be cool?
Oh, yeah.
And so we designed this to just basically be an add-on accessory for the mic stand. And we've sold a bunch of these. Haven't started shipping them yet, but we've sold a bunch of these already to customers who also think they're adorable, like I do.
I can just imagine your conversation with the guys over at Yellowtech had to be, love your mic stand and base, but you forgot something, and I'm glad you did.
Pretty much what I said. Yeah.
And so this gives you what do the buttons do? Logic?
Well, they do a couple different things depending on a dip switch setting.
Okay.
If you were hooking it up to an Axia console, which I highly recommend, by the way, then that could be on and off.
Okay.
It could be talk and mute if you wished. So it just basically depends on how you wire up the logic interface.
Okay.
But if you had a dip switch in a different position, it might actually be on and off, and we might provide the logic. So let's imagine that you had this thing connected up to a Rodecaster Pro, for example. Well, a Rodecaster Pro does not have a logic input. It doesn't have a mute control, for example. So we provide that, and we actually route the microphone signal through our base on the way to the Rodecaster Pros. So we do the muting. So now the guest actually has a headphone amp and a mute control for his microphone before it ever gets there. Yes, this is the...
Is this the other end of it?
This is the other end of it. And the thinking, by the way, is, look, we could either put a whole bunch of connectors on the back, which would make a big mess. Or we could just have two cables that come out of the back, go into a table grommet.
That's so neat.
And then all your connections are out of sight.
Out of sight. Okay. Oh, we're not going to go through all the connections, but all the connections you need to do everything that this box does are right there. This is niche and need. Look at this.
Niche and need. I love this. I'm going to rename the company, Kirk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. That is so cool.
So yeah, that's pretty fun. And do I have time for another, or would you like to stop?
We got time.
Oh, okay.
Time for another.
Well, here's one for you. This is very popular product. In fact, you mentioned it a little while ago.
Well, yeah. In fact, I own a couple of these.
You do.
And we used to talk about it almost every week on the show.
And by the way, you paid full price.
I did.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Corny, thanks you. The idea.
No, I think I came in and bought it from Mrs. Catfish.
Mrs. Catfish. Then you paid more than full price.
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. I think she went shopping after that.
Indeed. So it was a very straightforward idea, which was we need a little USB stereo in, stereo out sound card thing. And so as I started thinking about doing this, I started examining the marketplace of low-cost USB audio things.
Okay.
And finding a pretty common problem amongst many of them, and that was whine.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know what that is? It's actually very interesting. Most of these low-cost USB devices, you won't see this, by the way, in high-end studio devices, okay, because they do exotic things to keep this from happening. But the cheap little guys generally use the computer power.
Sure.
And they run everything on that computer power. And so you got this nice little ground loop between the filthy ground in your PC and your audio circuits. And so all kinds of weird stuff will happen. Like you'll touch the device and it'll go from
Yeah.
like, well, it just changed. Well, you know, what the heck is going on, right? I mean, okay, so there's all this ground loop garbage going on, and so there's actually a solution to it, but it turns out to be pretty hard. And that is, you got to isolate that ground. And so we regenerate power. We use the power coming from the computer, but we don't use it directly. We use it to regenerate using DC to DC converters. We isolate the data lines. Okay, so even the data lines are galvanically isolated so that they're not connecting through. And of course, we use true balanced inputs and outputs. So what you get is a nice quiet device that you plug in and it just works. And so we actually can't really make these fast enough.
I want to make sure I understand something about the power. When you first started talking, you said the problem with other devices is they use power from the computer.
Yeah.
And so do you, but it ain't the same electrons.
I guess not.
It's like a new crop of electrons.
And I'll explain it. You know, you got 5 volts coming from USB power.
Yeah.
And most people just hang everything on that 5 volts, including their audio circuits, which is one of the reasons the audio does not get very loud with your typical USB interface. In other words, it might top out at plus 12 dBu.
Right.
And then it clips.
Right.
Okay. We actually take that 5 volts, use it to drive DC to DC converters. We generate a new 5 volts, which is clean on our side, and we generate a plus and minus 15 volt power supply, which is, you know, big voltage. So now we can do plus 24 dBu out, as opposed to, you know, clipping at 5 volts.
Yeah.
And so it's expensive. It's expensiver than than the usual cheap way, but you know, people like it very much.
It comes with some accessories. I think you've chosen to throw some things in.
We always do. This is just kind of part of what we do. We figure you're going to be opening this box on a Sunday night, and you want to solve the problem.
That's right. Best Buy's closed.
Yeah, you open the box, and oh my gosh, where's the Studio Hub adapter? Are you kidding me? Right. So we put the Studio Hub adapters in here. We put the USB cable in here.
Studio Hub goes from the RJ45 to XLRs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So pretty much, you know, it's I hate to use plug and play because it's overused, but I think in your experience it's been plug and play.
I was the noise. I really hadn't experienced the noise until I learned about this product, and I was using some cheaper thing as an audio interface from my computer, and I kept getting all this noise. I thought, you know, I've got one of Catfish's boxes here. This is at my office, and so I plugged it in, and whew, clean as a whistle. So then I put that in at a couple of radio stations. So anyway,
thank you very much.
There you go.
The other thing that's cool about that is if you have a audio over IP plant, one of the things that makes engineers nervous is having to plug somebody's staff member's computer. Maybe if it's a college station, and the kids like to bring in their own laptops to play the playlist from their computer. Well, they get nervous about, you don't know what's on that. What are you going to infect my AOIP devices with?
Oh, yeah.
So they love this because they can just put this on the input of a node or whatever, and then the students or the community staff can just plug the USB into their computer. Done. You know, you're isolating both, you know, from the computer from the audio over IP, but you still can have it coming into the console and all the same advantages. So.
And that one it's class compliant even with Windows. So you just plug it into Windows.
This is class compliant with everything.
Yeah. Good deal. All right. You got one more thing you do, and then we're gonna.
Oh, you want another one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this one's pretty fun. You've probably seen the mic arms that have the little LED on them.
Yeah, the ring like that one does.
Yeah, like that one does. Well, now this actually does have the drive built in.
So
it will drive the LED ring, but maybe you have a mic arm, and so you don't have the base, and you want to drive that tally. This is the mic tally gizmo, and so you mount this in a hole, like a grommet hole, basically, on your countertop. And in fact, Kirk, I think you've got experience with that. You use a hole saw, and you drill a little hole, and then this whole thing kind of sits in that hole.
And it looks like you knew what you were doing because
it looks that way.
The bezel here covers it all up.
Right. Even if you're a little wobbly, it covers it all up.
I'm always wobbly when I'm using the drill.
Right. That's right. So what you end up with is this nice little connector right down at the base of your mic arm. Then you just plug into it, and then the power supply and the interfacing goes back here, and it passes the audio right through. Go onto your preamp.
Yeah.
Very simple device. You know, it's less than $200, and it solves a nice little problem.
and it keeps your studio very neat.
We do a lot of this kind of thing.
Yeah, good deal. All right. Hey, we've been talking with Catfish and with Corny about needs and niches, or niches and needs, about fulfilling, things that need to get done, things that we can't do for ourselves very well, or if we did, they'd look pretty sloppy. One time I built the equivalent of a Henry super relay, and that was a mistake because it was a mess. Not sure it was very safe either. I don't think the building ever burned down, but
UL didn't call?
who? UL. No, the fire marshal. He was we bought him some drinks. The fire marshal. Everything was okay. Hey, we're going to have a tip of the week and a final word from Corny and from Catfish in just a few minutes. Right now, I want to talk to. We've been mentioning Broadcasters General Store as a place where you can get the results of Corny's work and Catfish's work. But our show is brought to you in part by Broadcast Tools, available from BGS at bgs.cc. Broadcast Tools has a remote control that has some super features associated with it. Suncast is going to get that up on the screen. It's this remote control that goes to your transmitter site or wherever you need control. It's the WVRC 8 Plus. It's web and voice dial-up remote control. So, hey, that really bridges the gap for both worlds. You may have a transmitter site where you just can't get web out there, but you sure can get dial-up dial-up voice. Maybe you've got a legacy site that's like that. Well, this is perfect because if you can connect it with a IP, well, it's got a web server built in. If you need to call it up, just like the good old Sign Systems box that you used to call up and hello, this does the same thing. The WVRC 8 Plus web and voice dial-up remote control from Broadcast Tools. A few of the features are it has an NTP time base or battery backed up real-time clock and calendar. Get this, it's plus or minus 2 minutes a year. Wow, I could use that. 4 virtual metering channels, an 1/8-inch TRS temperature probe port, so you can check out the temperature in the transmitter or in the building, wherever you need to, over a very wide range. It has an internal temp monitor. That'll help you out, too, to see if the room's super hot. A jack for external power failure power supply. Stereo silence sensor monitoring is built in as well with telco monitoring. It has internet down alarm feature, front panel microphone so you can listen to what's going on at the site. It's simple. It's just the manager giving a tour of the site. Okay, no wonder the door opened up. It's so many features are available here. A couple important things, because Broadcast Tools knows how to design gear for RF environments. It's fully RFI protected on the inputs, on the outputs, on the power, on the temperature. It's a one rack unit chassis, so it doesn't take up very much room in your equipment rack. It's just terrific for transmitter sites. Maybe you've got an old remote control that you need to replace. You need to consider this one. This one can really do the job for you quite nicely. From Broadcast Tools, the WVRC 8 Plus, and it's available from Broadcasters General Store at bgs.cc. I love these folks. They have sharp pencils, good discounts. They can also, they're really good at telling you when a product is going to arrive, because they are in constant touch with their suppliers. I know they're in constant touch with my friends at Telos. They call us all the time. Hey, how soon can you get this? Hey, what's the delay on that? How soon can my customer get one of these? We talk to them quite a bit at Broadcasters General Store. Their website's super helpful too. It's gone through changes over the years, and I was using it just the other day to get some pricing on some things that we need for a transmitter site. So check it out at bgs.cc, or call them. They love to talk on the phone at 352-622-7700. All right, I'm Kirk Harnack. We are at Angry Audio in Franklin, Tennessee, and Catfish asked me, "Are you going to ask us for a tip of the week?" I said, "Yeah, that's right. Usually I ask him about a minute beforehand, but Catfish actually gave himself an hour warning."
I was prepared.
You were prepared. It's good for you. It's better than I am usually.
So I brought this because it is so cool.
All right.
I don't know how useful this is going to be to everyone else, but I think it's really amazing. These are called smart tweezers.
Can I hold that in front of
Absolutely.
the camera?
Yeah.
Okay, smart tweezers.
Smart tweezers. And there's a few different brands, but the idea basically, if you look at the conductive end of those tweezers, you could use a component. You could actually pick up a resistor or a capacitor or a diode or whatever. And and then if you look at that tiny little OLED screen, it will tell you what the value is.
Wow.
And so it's a pretty useful tool, especially when we're using surface mount components, and my big fat fingers have spilled them all over my desktop, and I'm trying to find the 10K resistor.
Oh,
This is really useful.
You mean wait? You put the tweezers on the part,
You can pick the part up with the tweezers,
and it
then
tells you what
exactly right.
Oh my gosh! Wow, because it's hard to tell a capacitor from a resistor.
Well, we don't have the big color code stripes anymore.
No,
Yeah.
there's no room for that.
Yeah, it's about the size of a grain of pepper now. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. This is from who?
This one's LCR. There's different brands.
Okay.
And so this, I actually have a couple of different ones. One of our technicians has a set, and I have this pair. And I think they're different brands. So I'm not recommending a brand. I just think the idea is fantastic. And so very useful.
Wow. What a great idea.
And I wish I'd thought of it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corny? Did we warn you about the tip of the week, or were you out of the room when we talked about that?
Well, I figured Catfish had the tip of the week. I didn't really have one.
Yeah, you can use my tip of the week.
I recommend the LCR smart tweezers because you can put your part right between there. And you don't have to memorize what the numbers are on the side of resistors. Like I have a few of them, like 102 is 1K and 104 is 10K.
Actually,
I know that. But
I have a question for you, Corny, that may result in a tip of the week. I may know what you're going to say, but I may not.
Okay.
So it seems that despite our efforts at radio stations of getting everyone to ingest commercials, long-form programs, or songs at similar levels, it seems like everybody's eyes and brain interprets VU meters differently. And even I don't want to run everything. I mean, we may run when we import things into an automation, it may run through some kind of a normalization, maybe even an RMS normalization, which is more common these days. But still, if I look at the output level of the automation, we may have a whole 3.5 minutes where it's 6 dB lower. And then a spot that came in from outside and nobody bothered to turn it down when they ingested it, and it's too hot. What is today's audio processors? Since you know them from other companies and you know your own, what's the best thing to do about levels that come out of an automation? For 3.5 minutes, you're at a level that's different from the previous or the next.
So now you're asking, with 2 minutes left on the show, a very involved topic here. Yeah. But how they look on the waveform on the screen, how tall they look when you compare one to another, doesn't necessarily tell you if it's going to be loudness matched. So you can run it through a loudness normalizer and see that the waveforms end up being all over the place rather than uniform the way you expect them to be. And most people, when they think about normalizing, they think of the old-fashioned way of normalizing, which is peak normalizing.
Right. Just look for the highest peak and
make sure they're all the same. But if they've done additional audio processing and the mastering to make it sound louder than it is at the same level, that's where it all falls apart. So when you have something that's using a normalization process, maybe it's using BS 1770 or whatever to do the measurements, you'll find that your waveforms are going to be all kinds of heights. But if you listen to them, they'll sound the same.
Oh, so what I'm seeing may actually be close in loudness anyway.
Right.
Okay.
And that's one of the things that throws some people off when they use the C level, which does the 1770 normalization, with the idea being the audio processor is now dealing with content that's loudness matched. So it's not, and when they'll look at the input of their downstream audio processor and see that this level is really hot now it's really low. And it's like, your thing isn't really leveling anything else. Like, well, it's not leveling. Your metering in your processor is showing peak sample level, and what you're seeing is what you would visually see. But if you were to put like a mechanical VU meter on it, the mechanical VU meter, you would notice, would be really close from song to song at that point, because that's a proper RMS. It's got its limitations.
Yeah.
It doesn't have, the frequency compensation for our ears, and that's the limitation of an analog VU meter. But it will show you more of what the normalization is doing versus looking at the height of the waveforms. And you'll find the VU meters are more consistent then.
Voltage is not the same as loudness.
Right.
Yeah. And RMS is closer, but it's also not exactly the same as loudness.
Yeah, things happen over time.
Things happen over time, and one of the things with the BS 1770 loudness system is that it's got a frequency compensation network in it that mimics how we hear. Think of the old Fletcher-Munson curve. There's a newer version of that now, and these newer meters have that built into them. So they're like a smarter VU meter, because think about it, if you when using the analog VU meters back in the day, if you play a song with a lot of bass in it, the meter's slamming over to the edge of the scale, even though it didn't sound any different. and that's where the limitation comes in, is with base heavy stuff. And so that sidechain gives the VU meter that same response as our ear, and it knocks down the bass somewhat. So now it's showing you how the ear hears the loudness.
Gotcha. All right.
So
good tip. Thank you both for your tips of the week. Thanks for taking time out to chat with us. It's I mean, not only is it good to talk to sponsors, but it's good to talk to really smart people who run businesses.
Hopefully you'll get that next week. The smart people. But thank you for having us, Kirk.
Thanks for reminding me about next week. You know what we're doing next week? We're doing the show live from a place I've never been before, the Armstrong Tower outside of New York City.
I want to see that.
Yeah. The SBE in New York is having a cookout, a barbecue there. We're doing TWiRT there at our usual time, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 Central. And we got an interesting surprise. TWiRT is sponsoring a very important part of the meeting next week. You see, they're remodeling the whole building, the main building where the first FM broadcasts were done in the 40 megahertz band, and they're remodeling that building so that the restrooms are out of commission. So we have rented a Porta-John, and TWiRT is the exclusive sponsor of the Porta-John. So come by if you're there. We appreciate and we want you to know that while you're using the Porta-John, that TWiRT is the number one podcast for your number 2 moments.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we got to go. Thanks so much to Suncast for being right on the ball and helping us out produce this episode. And we'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.